Alright, how's everybody doing? I'm going to run you through the install of the new TorqMasters locker for the front of a Kawasaki Mule. The new models 2020 to current 2025. FX, FXT, FXR, DX, DXT. They should all have the same front differential in them. This is a prototype currently. I believe this will be the part number when it comes out. TL-KM228. For parts, you might need this gasket from Kawasaki. It's the gasket that goes under this ring here. I tore mine the first time I took it apart. It's not a big, it's $20 gasket. Part number 11061-1413. You might not hurt yours at all, but it's good to have it in mind. There's other numbers on there. I'll get to them later. To do this, can of brake clean to clean out the inside of your stuff, your differential, red Loctite for the ring gear bolts, blue Loctite for these case bolts, 12mm, 17mm sockets. These are 3/8 drive for the torque wrench. A torque wrench that can go from 0 to 50 foot-pounds. A 1/2 inch drive impact with a 17mm is nice to have to break loose your ring gear bolts. 3/8 drive impact is nice to break off these. Not necessary either of them, but it's easy to do because you can just hold on to it. Dead blow hammer is nice to knock around on stuff, not hurt it. A real hammer, you will need one of these. About an 1/8 inch punch, and a long one. It needs to be longer than this. This will get you started, but I'll show you when we're in there. This is actually too short. You can't drive the pin all the way out. So what I've done is I've taken an 1/8 inch welding rod, knocked a slag off of it, and then just took a wire wheel to it and cleaned it off so I can use it to drive down through there without getting, knocking stuff off in it. This works great. Later on, a number 25 and a number 18 drill bit. You can also use 150 thou and 170 thou shims, whatever you may need. That's to check the differential once you're done. A couple of trays or just a clean spot to put the bolts and bearings while you work so they don't get dirt all over them. And a couple big flathead screwdrivers, and possibly, although you can do without them, a couple little pry bars. So, to get started, take this cover off. Just nice to take it off in a cross pattern. You don't want to start pulling all this stuff up from one side, bending it, tweaking around on it or anything. You want to take things up as square as you can and pick them off as straight as you can. I'll show you why in a bit. I've had this one apart a lot, but as you see here, they have Loctite on them. The first time I took these out, they came out hard, and they came out hard about the whole way. So be ready to work pretty hard to get them off there. Now this thing has pry spots here, here, and here. So you can take your flathead screwdrivers or your bars or what have you. You need to try and pry this thing off as straight as you can. Sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you won't. I got a pretty good pull there, and it came right off. There's the gasket I was talking about. If that thing gets torn or what have you, you'll have to replace it. And then this is very important too. This thing here has 2 of these shims. You want to make sure that these shims stay exactly where they were. You put them in there and make sure they stay in there. And set this out of the way. And then we're going to pull this up out of the differential. And it's the same deal here. As you can see, this is a very nice machine surface. It fits exactly on this bearing. If you start prying around on this thing and get it all cocked up to one side, it will not come off. You'll basically have to tap it back down flat and try and walk it straight up off there, because you will ruin this surface if you try and get too rough with it. It's just aluminum. You got to be gentle with it. Same deal here. We'll have to pull this straight up out of here. If we get pulling on it and get crooked, it will get stuck. Just tap it back down and try again. You can just get it with your hand and pull it straight up. And then same deal here. You can't see it, but down there at the bottom, one of those little shims. Make sure it stays in there, right where you found it. Now, first thing you got to do is take this bearing off. I've been able to take a couple of big flathead screwdrivers and get it off. Sometimes you just got to find the two bolts that are in the right position to let you do it. If you don't want to fight with that, you can take a couple pry bars. It's much easier with pry bars and just kind of bump, bump, bump. You don't want to actually grab hold of this thing and pry on it real hard. Just bump them up. You can see I'm bumping them up together, and it's just walking this thing straight up off here. Once again, it's very important to walk things straight up off of it. Don't try and get it in a big bind off to one side and keep taking it off or you'll ruin something. Just like that. That bearing's off. Once again, put it somewhere clean. And then you take these bolts off here. These babies are tight. Red Loctite from the factory, 50 foot-pounds Torq, so they'll fight you. If you're trying to take them off with a wrench, you're going to need to put this in a vise. Okay. Once they're all off, once again, take them out, put them somewhere clean, we won't lose them. And then we got to take this piece off of the differential. Once again, you can pick this up and it'll almost come loose on its own. But if it doesn't, just flip it over. And like I said, here I have a dead blow hammer. Just hold this up by the bearing. You can use a metal hammer. Just don't beat on this thing, just gentle taps. Kind of walking around. And there it comes. Now, the first time I took this apart, this shim, you can't see it real well, but there's a shim right there. And I've got that stuck in with red grease, but the first time I took this apart, that thing fell out. So I took some red grease and stuck in there, so it's kind of glued in at this point. It does not want to come out. So let's get our rocker parts here. And we'll put this gear right there in the box, set this off to the side, and now we have to get this cross pin out. So to do that, there's a roll pin right here. And I have found, if you look, it's noticeably shorter to go from this side down than it is to go from this side up. And here's your issue with your short punch. You can't get this punch all the way through that thing. You can see the hole, the punch starts getting wide right there. So you can drive it down a good ways with a punch, but you'll have to finish it. And then, like I said, I found it best to drive it down this way. So you're going to hang this over the edge of your workbench, get a real hammer, and tap on it until your pick starts getting stuck. Like I said, you don't have to use a welding rod. This is what I'm using. It works great, but you can use any sort of substitute. And another thing you can do if you're worried about it, as you can see, it's falling right down at the bottom. If you don't want to drive your pin out too far, take your welding rod and set it right there, and then you can put a little black mark on it so you don't drive your pin out too far and knock it on the floor or something. If you're used to working with roll pins, you can kind of feel once this thing starts getting loose, you'll know when it's almost done. Okay, so there it was. Not all the way out, but I can push the pin. So, down out of there. And the next thing we're going to do is pull this pin out. One spider comes out. These spiders have these little shims on them. The shims stay with the spiders. They're not going to be reused. Take your pin out, set it somewhere clean. Other spider, once again, shim stays with it. It's not going to get reused. And finally, your last side gear. Now, once again, down in here is another one of those shims. I've already got this one stuck down with red grease. It's not going to fall out, but you need to make sure that it stays in this case. So with that done, first thing we need to look at is one of these gears is noticeably wider than the other one. And it's going to be the same deal with the locker. Noticeably wider than the other one. The reason for that is the differential is offset. If you look at this hole, it's way closer to the ring gear than it is to this side. So you want to take your thicker piece and put it down in here. And you'll know it's right because this shaft will go through and actually hit this. If you use the thin one, I'll just pull it out and show you. If you use this thin one, it won't even hit, the pin won't even hit it. Like it's obviously too low, so it won't be hard to tell if you've messed something up. But yes, the thicker one goes in first. Just sits down in there like that. And then once again, red grease. I've already had red grease on these. I've taken this in and out a couple times now. I've already got red grease on these springs and down in these spring pockets. It helps a lot to keep these things from falling out or laying over or doing anything weird while you're putting this together. Just take some red moly grease, pop down in there, and it almost sticks them in like glue. Now you can put this pin in now if you want or later. It doesn't really matter. But one thing to remember is that there's female and male pins on this. So you got to match it up with this. Male, female. Female, male. So you can't put it in male, male, or it won't even attempt to go in. So make sure you've got those lined up right. And then you've just got to make sure your springs are in. Everything's looking nice. And then it's time to put the spring in. So with this, you can take this all the way out if you want to be able to see to put it back in. It's not a huge deal. Just make sure this is lined up and you push it straight back and you line it up flush with the side of the case. Basically how it was when you pulled it apart. When you pulled this thing apart, it was flush with the case like that. Just do the same. But make sure that you keep this hole parallel with the pin or it'll be a big pain to drive back in. And then all you do is tap it back in. Now when you start getting close to the face here, you don't want to beat it clear down flat like that. You want to take your punch and make sure that it goes down past this surface. Make sure it's below this surface, because if it sticks up, it's going to hit this and either, well, there's a pretty good chance it'll cause you problems when you try and tighten this down. It might break something, you know, it could get pushed in and nothing bad happens. Why take the risk? Just take your punch, drive it down so it's below this surface, and you're good to go. And then finally, we're going to take this, make sure this is sticking in there, flip it over, and set it back on there just as square as you can. There you go. Every other time I've done this, I've had to take a hammer and kind of tap around it. It's not a big deal. I've used this hammer, just do that. And it'll slowly walk right down and ball right on. And then once it's on, you can spin it to line the holes up. You don't have to get the holes lined up beforehand. So, now, I'm going to take these bolts for the ring gear. We're going to put red Loctite on them. These bolts have a crappy job, and they're basically bolts, well, you really never want to see them over the life of your machine, but if you do see them, you only want to see them once. You do not want to have these things come out on you, so just a dab of red Loctite. on each one. Make sure you start them in a few threads by hand. With the tolerances on this, you shouldn't be able to cross thread these things, but I can tell you this, you don't want to cross thread them. Kawasaki does not sell parts for this differential. If something goes wrong in here, you're buying the whole thing. And then I emailed the manufacturer of the differential, Tough Torque. They make them for Kawasaki. The spec for them is 50 foot-pounds. So we'll just take the 1/2 inch impact, run them down till they touch. Once again, in a cross pattern. That one impact you're hearing, I mean, that's the inertia carrying. I'm not even trying to impact this. I'm just running them down till they touch. And then you'll have to take this over to a vise or something similar that you can put it in that'll hold it while you torque these. You don't need to squeeze the heck out of it in the vise. You know, it can sit loose. You just want it to stop on something when you're trying to torque it, so you're not sitting there trying to hold it by hand. So get your torque wrench. 50 foot-pounds. 17mm socket. Just go around them in a nice cross pattern. And then run around them one more time just to make sure. Okay. Now we'll just go ahead and set this down to 20 to match our next set of bolts. Throw the 12 on there. We'll hopefully be done with those and never have to have them in our differential ever again. Okay, take this out. At this point, you know, any dirt or anything you've got on it, like I said, there's some red Loctite crud. Bearing still alright. Like I said, you don't want to put anything dirty back in this differential. Nothing it didn't come out with. And then finally, we're going to check our clearance here. And now, as you can see, there's actually some, you know, they sit kind of closed to start with. The spec from TorqMasters on this is 150 to 170 thousandths of an inch. 0.150, 0.170. You can get feeler gauges and stack them up or do whatever you can do. Kind of an everyman thing here is a number 25 drill bit is 149 thousandths, and a number 18 drill bit is 169 thousandths. So no way that number 18 is going in there. Number 25 goes in. So perfect. And then after that, we're going to tap this bearing back on. Like I said, this is a very precise fit So you want to tap just this inside. Do not hit on the outside race. Hit right here on the inside and just go around it in a circle. Try not to have any trash on your hammer. And just walk it around and walk right down on there. You can hear the tone change when it's down. You don't have to beat the crap out of it. Tapping it's fine. A few more just to make sure. Sat down nice. And now we're back to this point. Now, once again, you do not want to put anything in this differential that it didn't come out with. So, I mean, just, you know, just dust that's settled in it from sitting here while I've been working on it, anything like that. You know, take that out of there. Take your brake clean. And clean it out. This doesn't seem like a big deal, but how often do you change the rear end grease on your buggy? Almost never, let's be honest. Make sure there's no dirt on this thing. So anything you put into this, anything you close up in this differential when you put it back together, it's going to stay in there for a long time. And once again, you pick this up, set it straight down in, as straight as you can. There it is. Turn it, make sure everything turns all right, doesn't seem weird. Perfect. And finally, put your gasket on. The gasket is directional. You can see it's got, and upside, it has to be the right way up and the right side to side. It's got 2 dowel pins here that should help you get this thing sitting where it needs to sit. And then finally, now, I would recommend you have some gear oil or something. Once again, clean this thing off. I recommend you have some gear oil or something to kind of stick these back into the, see, I can see dirt on that right there. Just from the small time I've had this open, they've got dirt on them, so. But anyway, if you put some gear oil on them or red grease or what have you, you can stick them into that bore so they won't fall out when you're trying to put it back together. If you're ready for it, it's not a big deal. You know, you can just set them on the bearing. But make sure you know where those are before you start putting this thing on there and start hammering it down trying to get it to fit. Because if you ruin one of those shims, I'm not sure, once again, that you can get them. I think you might be able to get them from Tough Torque, who makes parts for Kawasaki, but I don't think you can get them from Kawasaki. So, get that on there. That was a lucky shot for me there. Normally, this goes on a little funky. I have to tap around on it with a hammer. This thing just fell right together this time. Now these, I would not recommend red Loctite on. They're enough of a pain already. Just some blue Loctite's all you need. These dowel pins will make your bolt holes go where they're going to go. I don't know if you can tell or not, but my bolt holes are actually to this side of every one of these holes. So normally, like, my bolt would need to be in the middle, but they actually need to be way over here, crowded to this edge to thread in. You can see there's a big gap there and not much there. I hope you can see. So pay attention to that, because unlike your ring gear bolts, you can cross thread these quite easily. And once again, Kawasaki does not sell parts for this differential. You don't got to go too crazy with the Loctite, especially on these. Too crazy with the Loctite, just a dab will do you, as they say. Then once again, cross pattern. These torque to 20 foot-pounds, that ain't much, so watch yourself when you're hammering on these with an impact. I'll just run them down. Finally, take your 12mm, 20 foot-pounds. This not nearly as bad as the ring gear. Like you can just hold this by hand, but go ahead and torque them up. Six-point sockets do not make you look cool when you're trying to hit a bolt on the first try. Alright, we'll just go around them one more time to make sure we're good to go. And that's it. Installed to spec, torqued, Loctited, ready to go back into the machine, which mine will be going very soon. I'm extremely excited to have this in my 2024 Mule 1000. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or need any help.